Chapter 1801. The tigress was dumbfounded when she saw that the wound on the tiger's stomach had disappeared without a trace. Then she saw the human in front of her remove the stitches on the wound and apply a layer of cold ointment on it. She looked at the human in front of her, then at the tiger cub lying beside her. For a moment, no one knew what she was thinking. "All right, bring your child back to the inner regions," Fengjiu said as he stroked the white tiger's head. Seeing this, the tigress seemed to have made up her mind. She bit the white tiger cub beside her and pushed it to Fengjiu's side. She stood up and shook her fur. Apart from the bandaged wound on her foreleg that still hurt a little, the rest of her body had already recovered. Furthermore, the aura that she had lost in her body had also returned. At this moment, she naturally exuded the aura of a divine beast. When Fengjiu and the tigress were talking, the Liu family members had already woken up. They watched in astonishment as the tigress bit her own tiger cub and pushed it to Fengjiu. What was even more unbelievable was that in just one night, the tigress, who was originally on the verge of death, had actually regained her vitality. This speed of recovery astonished them. "Awoo!" The white tiger cub stretched its back and opened its small mouth to let out a soft awoo. Its voice was as soft as a cat's meow. It slowly opened its eyes and ran weakly from Fengjiu to the tigress's side with its four short legs. Its cute little head rubbed randomly under the tigress's body, as if it was looking for something. Fengjiu smiled as he watched the white tiger cub raise its round little head and suck desperately under the tigress's body. It even turned its head slightly from time to stare at Fengjiu. The cub's adorable look made Fengjiu unable to shift his gaze away. The tigress allowed the cub to eat as it looked lovingly at its cub. She raised one of her tiger claws and gently stroked the white fur of the cub until it burped. Then, she pushed it in front of Fengjiu again. The cub thought that its mother was playing with it, so it ran back excitedly. Its short tail wagged happily, and it quickly hid in its mother's soft fur. The tigress had no choice but to grab the cub again and push it in front of Fengjiu again. This action made the Liu family members stare at the sky, completely speechless. This was really strange. Why would the tigress be willing to give her newborn tiger cub to someone else? It was unbelievable that she would push the cub out again and again. "Are you going to give it to me?" Fengjiu asked with a smile. She was wondering if she should bring the little white tiger along. "Awoo!" The tigress let out a low howl and pushed the cub back to Fengjiu's side. This time, she turned around and leaped, disappearing into the forest. "Awoo, awoo, awoo!" The cub saw that the tigress had left and wanted to chase after her with its short legs. However, after running for some distance, it couldn't find tigress. It couldn't help but squat there and let out a pitiful howl. Fengjiu walked forward and carried the cub. He looked at the forest and said, "You don't have to look anymore. Your mother has given you to me. You can come and see it when you have the chance in the future." Chapter 1802. At this moment, Old Master Liu was looking curiously at the little white tiger in Fengjiu's arms. When he heard his words, he smiled and said, "We can leave any time. If we speed up, we might be able to walk out in 4 to 5 days." He paused and looked at the little white tiger in Fengjiu's arms. He said hesitantly, "Little brother Feng, if you carry this little white tiger down the mountain like this, I'm afraid it will bring you trouble." White tigers were rare to begin with, much less such a small tiger cub, not to mention that he had yet to form a contract with it. Even if he did, carrying this little white tiger to a crowded place was bound to bring unnecessary trouble. If someone really set their sights on it and tried to snatch it away, he was afraid that he would be killed because of it. It was also because they had chatted along the way that he felt the need to remind this youth. "It's just a little tiger cub. It won't happen," Fengjiu said with a smile, as if he did not understand the meaning behind his words. Actually, she understood what he meant. This Uncle Liu was worried that after entering the city, the little white tiger would be targeted and snatched away, or even be killed. However, who would dare to snatch her things? Who would have the ability to snatch them away? It's always good to be careful. Why don't you form a contract with this little tiger cub first, then keep it in the contract space? This way, it won't attract the attention of others. Old Master Liu suggested. After all, As long as one formed a contract with a spirit beast, one could naturally let the spirit beast enter the contract space in one's body. This way, it would be more convenient. Let's talk about it after we leave this forest. It's still small now. I still have to think of what to find for it to eat. She was a little distressed at the mention of this. Such a small tiger cub probably didn't even know how to eat meat. So where could she find milk for it to eat? We can feed it water first. When we reach the city, we could buy some goat milk or porridge and water. As Old Master Lu spoke, he gestured for everyone to clear the fire before walking down. After they walked far away, the female tiger walked out again from a certain part of the forest. She stood between the trees and watched from afar. Only when they could not be seen did she leap back into the depths of the mountain. For the rest of the day, they did not get much rest. Perhaps it was because Fengjiu's actions had left the Lu family's men dumbfounded, or perhaps it was because they could not tell what kind of person Fengjiu was. Thus, even though many people in the Lu family had designs on the little white tiger, they did not dare to act impudently. After all, it was one thing for them to be moved, but their family head obviously had a good impression of this young man. If they were to set their sights on this young man, perhaps Fengjiu wouldn't even need to do anything. Their family head would deal with them first. Another day passed. When the sky gradually darkened, they rested again. After all, it was not easy to travel at night. Fengjiu, on the other hand, was teasing the cub in her arms to drink some water. Unexpectedly, the cub didn't drink any water at all. It only sniffed and turned its head away, lying listlessly in her arms. Not drinking? You haven't eaten anything all day. Come lick some water. She poured some more water, but the cub still turned its head away without giving her any face. Chapter 1803. Fengjiu said helplessly, "This little thing doesn't even drink water, and there's nothing for it to eat in this forest. It would be better if it was bigger, but it's just a baby tiger." She was also helpless. Seeing the little white tiger lying listlessly in her arms, she felt her heart ache. This newborn baby tiger had been hungry for an entire day, and they were going to stay in this forest for a few more days. If it didn't drink water, wouldn't it be hungry forever? She rarely made fasting pills for cultivators, so she couldn't give it one even if she wanted to, but suddenly an idea flashed through her mind. That's it. She still had spiritual liquid in her space. She could just feed it to the baby tiger, right? With a flip of her hand, she took out a bottle of spiritual liquid, opened it, and put it next to the baby tiger's mouth. "Here, try this." Seeing this, Old Master Lu couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. If humans don't drink medicine, then spiritual beasts won't either. Besides, this medicine can't be eaten casually. It's fine, it's just some spiritual liquid. There's no harm in eating it. As Fengjiu said this, he saw the baby tiger stick out its little tongue to lick the liquid. He couldn't help but squint, thinking to himself, this little thing knows its stuff. The gray-robed old man beside them smelled the scent and couldn't help but shudder. He quickly walked up to the baby tiger and sniffed it. When the rich spiritual energy and medicinal fragrance entered his nose, the old man widened his eyes and stared at Fengjiu with a pained expression. You're actually giving such a precious thing to a spiritual beast? You're such a jerk. Old Master Lu, how can you say that? Little brother Feng has the freedom to use his things however he wants. Don't overstep your boundaries. Old Master Lu frowned and said from the side. Fengjiu smiled and glanced at Old Master Lu. He knew that the old man could tell the quality of the medicinal liquid in her hand with just a sniff, so he didn't blame him. When Old Master Lu heard this, he said to Old Master Lu, "Old Master, you don't know, but that bottle of spiritual liquid in his hand is definitely above the 5th grade. Above the 5th grade. He actually used it to feed a baby tiger. Even if it's not mine, it's still painful to see it." Hearing this, Old Master Lu was a little surprised. Above the 5th grade? His heart skipped a beat, and he looked at Fengjiu with even more curiosity. She gave him a spiritual liquid above the 5th grade? Spiritual liquids of the 5th rank and above were treasures that would be fought over in an auction. She actually used it to feed a little baby beast? Who was this little brother Feng? Did he not know the preciousness of tier 5 and above spirit liquids? little brother Feng, old Master Lu, little old Master Lu, and little brother, old Master Lu. My master gave it to me, Feng Jiu said matter-of-factly. She blamed everything on her master, who was nowhere to be seen. Hearing this, old Master Lu and old Master Lu looked at each other and asked again, "Then do you know what grade the spiritual liquid in your hand is? Do you know what a 5th grade spiritual liquid represents?" "I know. It represents money." Feng Jiu smiled and said, "I know that a bottle of spiritual liquid can be sold for a lot of money, but my master said that I can't sell it and must keep it for my own use." Chapter 1804. They watched as the little cub drank the entire bottle of medicine and licked the corner of its mouth as if it hadn't had enough yet. Its fur seemed to have become smoother and shinier. They couldn't help but feel envious. Sometimes, humans really couldn't compare to pet beasts. This kind of treatment was not something that ordinary people could compare to. They rested in the forest for a night and continued their journey the next day. Along the way, old Master Lu pestered Feng Jiu to ask about his master, and old Master Lu told him many things about this place. 2 days later, that evening, the Lu family lit a fire and rested. Old Master Lu and Feng Jiu sat by the fire. After passing a piece of barbecued meat to Feng Jiu, old Master Lu smiled. "We'll reach the city tomorrow afternoon. After staying here for so long, we can finally have a good rest when we get back." Yes, I've been eating barbecued meat for the past few days. I've lost my appetite when I see it now. When we reach the city tomorrow, let's find a good restaurant and have a good meal." She smiled again. "I still want to treat you guys to a big meal. Ha ha. If that's the case, we won't stand on ceremony." Old Master Lu didn't decline. They chatted and laughed until late at night, when they leaned against a tree to rest. However, that night, Feng Jiu, who was resting with the little cub in his arms, heard the sound of coughing, followed by the sound of uneven breathing. Old Master Lu's anxious voice and Lu Jiming's cry of surprise. She opened her eyes and saw the Lu family surrounding the tree where old Master Lu was resting. Their faces were filled with worry and anxiety. She put the little cub down and walked up to them. Old Master, medicine, hurry and swallow the medicine." Old Master Lu's anxious voice carried a trace of panic as he poured out the medicine for old Master Lu with trembling hands. Father, how are you? Father, don't scare me," Lu Jiming said in a trembling voice as he gently patted his father's back, trying to help him breathe. Feng Jiu took a look and saw that old Master Lu's face was covered in sweat. His face was pale, and he looked like he was about to collapse. Both of his hands were clutching the front of his clothes tightly. His expression was pained, and he looked like he was in so much pain that he couldn't breathe. His entire body was tense, and he fainted. Seeing this, Feng Jiu hurriedly shouted at them, "Quickly lay him flat." When Elder Lu saw that it was Feng Jiu, he hurriedly listened to him and laid him down. The white-haired old man's face was filled with helplessness and panic. "Little brother Feng, what should we do? What to do? Master's illness this time is more serious than the previous few times. What should we do?" "Fa father," Lu Jiming cried out in a trembling voice. He looked at his father, who was not moving at all and did not even seem to be breathing. Trembling, he reached out to touch his father. He was so frightened that he fell to the ground and muttered absent-mindedly, Father is not breathing." "What?" Elder Lu was shocked. He stepped forward to take a look and immediately panicked. How could this be? How could this be? Seeing that they were scared out of their wits, Feng Jiu squeezed forward and half knelt beside Elder Lu. He crossed his arms and pressed on his chest to give him first aid. At the same time, he instructed, "Big brother Lu, come over and blow air into your father's mouth." What? Lu Jiming stood there in a daze. He did not understand Feng Jiu's words or what he meant. He was already dead. Why was he blowing air into his father's mouth? What was he trying to do? Chapter 1805. Without further thought, Lu Jiming hurriedly knelt down and followed Feng Jiu's instructions. He lifted his father's chin slightly, pinched his nose, and blew into his mouth forcefully. Feng Jiu did not stop. She continued to give him first aid until she felt that he had regained his breath. She then asked Lu Jiming to step back and untied Old Master Lu's shirt to let him rest. Cough, cough. Old Master Lu slowly opened his eyes and looked at Fengjiu in a daze, as if he did not know what had happened. Meanwhile, the elderly man in gray and Lu Jiming, who had already stepped back, widened their eyes in disbelief when they saw that the person who had stopped breathing had regained his breath and even opened his eyes. He's alive. What's wrong? Old Master Lu asked as he rubbed his chest gently. The pain this time was more severe than before. Was he really going to die soon? F.A. Father, are you all right? How do you feel now? Lu Jiming asked in a trembling voice. He could not believe that someone who had stopped breathing a moment ago could be revived. Quick, let me take a look. The elderly man in gray hurriedly squatted by the side and reached out to check his pulse. When he felt that the pulse had returned to normal, he could not help but look in shock at Fengjiu, who had already stepped aside. Did I faint again just now? Old Master Lu asked as he looked at the people around him and smiled. Don't worry, it's fine. You'll be fine after taking the medicine. The Lu family members at the side all looked at their master with complicated gazes. He had not fainted just now. He had stopped breathing. If not for that youth, he would have... At that thought, everyone's gaze turned towards the youth who was standing at the side with the little white tiger in his arms. They could not help but think to themselves, who exactly is this youth? Does he really only know how to treat beasts? But just now, he was clearly the one who had saved their master. Why are you all looking at me? Isn't Uncle Lu fine now? Fengjiu stroked the little white tiger in his arms as he yawned and walked back. It was only the middle of the night. She decided to sleep for a while more. What's wrong? Old Master Lu sensed that something was amiss and asked, Father, just now. Lu Jiming wanted to tell him that he had stopped breathing, but he didn't know how to say it. He could only look at Elder Lu beside him. Elder Lu retracted his gaze and said to Old Master Lu, Old Master, you died just now. Hearing this, Old Master Lu was taken aback, seemingly puzzled. Dead? How is that possible? He was about to die. How could he wake up? It's true. Lu Jiming couldn't help but look at Fengjiu. If it wasn't for him, Father, you wouldn't have woken up. You really died just now. We didn't know what to do. It was little brother Feng who saved you. After seeing Elder Lu nod, Master Lu was shocked. His eyes couldn't help but turn to where Fengjiu was resting. After a while, he gestured, Help me up. Since little brother Feng saved me, I should thank him personally. Hearing that, Elder Lu and Lu Jiming hurriedly helped him up and walked with him towards the youth who was squinting under the tree. Little brother Feng, Old Master Lu called out when they reached the front. Chapter 1806. Little brother Feng, thank you for saving me. Old Master Lu bowed to him solemnly. Fengjiu stroked the soft fur of the little cub in his arms and smiled. Actually, I didn't do anything. It was Uncle Lu who transferred chi to you and saved you. Lu Jiming didn't think much of it at first, but now that Fengjiu mentioned it, his expression couldn't help but become a little unnatural. Although he was his father, the matter of transferring chi through mouth to mouth was really quite strange. However, he was also very happy that he could save his father by transferring chi to him. Little brother Fengjiu, I have something to ask. He sat down next to Fengjiu, as if he wanted to talk about it in detail. Uncle Lu, please ask. Fengjiu smiled. Do you know what illness I have? Old Master Lu asked bluntly. His wise gaze fell on Fengjiu's face, as if he didn't want to miss the expression on the youth's face. He wanted to know if he knew what illness he had. More or less. Fengjiu nodded and didn't hide it. He looked at him and said, You should be suffering from angina pectoris when the illness acts up. You have short breaths and cold sweat, and sometimes your chest feels tight too. Old Master Lu and Old Master Lu were shocked. He knew just by looking. Then his medical skills, that little brother Feng, you have a way, right? You have a way to save my old master, right? Old Master Lu asked in a trembling voice. When Lu Jiming heard this, he remembered that Fengjiu had saved his father's life. Now that he knew that he might have a way, he immediately knelt down in front of him without another word. Little brother Feng, please save my father, I beg of you. As long as you can cure my father, our Lu family will never forget your great kindness. Hey, what are you doing? Don't kneel to me for no reason. She jumped up and quickly jumped to the side, glaring at him. If you have something to say it properly. Don't kneel so easily, I don't like it. Little brother Feng, I came out this time to find a doctor. If you can cure my illness, this Lu will definitely thank you. Lord Lu said seriously, but there was also a trace of nervousness in his heart. The young physician before him might have already noticed the problem with his body, but he didn't bring it up. Instead, he told them that his medical skills were only superficial, and he only treated spirit beasts. If he hadn't acted up in the middle of the night, and if he hadn't happened to be here, they might have really missed this chance to live. When Fengjiu heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. Uncle Lu, aren't you afraid that I'll make it worse? Seeing that he didn't directly refuse, and instead said such joking words, Master Lu was delighted and hurriedly said, I believe in little brother Feng. Fengjiu smiled and said, let's talk about it when we reach the city. Originally, she had planned to go to the city to take a look at him, but she didn't expect him to have a relapse in the middle of the night. Moreover, his condition seemed to be quite serious. All right, Master Lu replied with a smile. His anxious heart finally relaxed. On this day, he couldn't help but hope that the sky would brighten soon so that they could leave the mountain and enter the city as soon as possible. He was anxious, so when the sky gradually brightened, they set off and walked down the mountain. Around noon, they arrived at the nearest town. They found a good restaurant and entered it. Chapter 1807. The Lu family members looked at old Master Lu. If this young man had not offered to treat their patriarch, they would not mind feasting on him. However, now that their patriarch had asked him for help, how could they still have the nerve to feast on him? Even if they wanted to eat, it should be the Lu family who treated him, right? Old Master Lu smiled and waved his hand. Since little brother Feng has said so, order a table of food and wine and have a good meal. Yes, everyone responded and cupped their fists at Fengjiu in unison. Thank you, young Master Feng. The men of the Lu family sat at a table downstairs while old Master Lu and the others went upstairs to the side room. After ordering a dozen or so dishes, the wine and water were served, and they went straight to the main topic. Little brother Feng, may I know how to treat my illness? Old Master Lu asked. Fengjiu drank a cup of wine and said, I believe old Master Lu has already told you about the food, so I won't say more. As for the treatment, it's nothing much. You just need to take medicine for about a month after the acupuncture. Old Master Lu was secretly shocked. This illness can be cured in about a month? You'll recover in about a month, and you'll see results in half a month. Fengjiu smiled and said, let's eat first. I'll give you acupuncture after you're full. Hearing this, they nodded and didn't say anything else. They accompanied him to finish the meal. However, despite the sumptuous food in front of them, except for Feng Nine, the other three people didn't eat much because they were thinking about their illness. After the meal, they drank a few cups of tea and changed rooms from the restaurant to an inn. In the guest room, take off your shirt and lie flat on the bed, Fengjiu said and turned to old Master Lu. I'll teach you this acupuncture technique. In the coming days, you can treat Uncle Lu with acupuncture. With this acupuncture technique and medicine, the effect will be better. Old Master Lu was excited. Teach me? How can I do that? Usually he would not teach non-disciples, but he actually that your medical skills are not bad. I just need to tell you the essentials. Why can't it work? Fengjiu smiled and asked Lu Jiming to stand guard outside and not let anyone disturb him. Then, he inserted the needles while giving instructions to old Master Lu. Half an hour later, Fengjiu walked out of the room. Behind him, Elder Lu looked at him with respect and admiration. The excitement on his old face still hadn't dissipated. Little brother Feng, how is my father? Lu Jiming asked when he saw them come out. I'm fine. I just fell asleep. Fengjiu said, I'm going back to rest too. I've already written the prescription and sent it to old Master Lu. You can handle the rest of the matter yourselves. With that, he walked past him and headed to another guest room. You stay in the guest room and watch over the patriarch. I'll go get the herbs right away. Elder Lu couldn't hide his excitement as he walked out, intending to get the herbs himself. When Feng Jiu reached the guest room, he asked the waiter to prepare a bath for him. After taking a bath, he summoned the little tiger from his space and hugged it in his arms and fell asleep. The next morning, Old Master Lu woke up feeling refreshed. The stuffy feeling in his chest that he had been suppressing all year round seemed to have cleared up quite a bit. His entire spirit was much better than yesterday, and he couldn't help but feel happy. Chapter 1808. That's right. His medical skills are really brilliant. If he's like this, his master must be even more amazing. Elder Lu sighed. If the disciple was so amazing, then how amazing would the master be? He just didn't know what kind of reclusive expert his master was. I'm relieved that Father's illness can be cured. As Lu Jiming spoke, the huge rock in his heart was finally put down. I've been worried that Father's illness can't be cured. If our Lu family falls into chaos, then things will be troublesome. Elder Lu shook his head. Every branch of the Lu family wants to fight for power. I'm afraid that if there's internal strife, other families will have the opportunity to take advantage of it. That will be troublesome. However, now that my body is gradually recovering, this is good news. His voice paused slightly. After thinking for a while, he said, "However, you have to pass down the order that the news of my treatment must not be spread. As for that, before my body fully recovers, it can't be spread. I was thinking of using this opportunity to clear out the people in the residence." "Yes, we understand." The two responded. "It's getting late. Little brother Feng should be awake. Let's go. Call him to eat something together." As Elder Lu spoke, he tidied his robes and walked out. The two behind him saw that he was in good spirits. They couldn't help but look at each other and followed him out of the room. "Little brother Feng." Elder Lu knocked on the door and called out. However, no one answered. "Little brother Feng? Little brother Feng?" Elder Lu also knocked on the door, but no one answered. He couldn't help but say, "Strange, could he be sleeping so soundly?" Masters, the young master of this room, has already checked out and left. The waiter who went upstairs saw them gathered there and reported. He left. When did he leave? The few of them were startled and asked in unison. He left when the sun rose. The waiter paused, then said, "Oh, right, that young master also left a message, saying that we'll meet again if fate wills it." Hearing that, Elder Lu and the others had an indescribable feeling in their hearts. Why'd he leave just like that? Old Master Lu sighed softly. "Along the way, I only called him Little Brother Feng. I didn't even manage to get his name out before I left. I don't know if I'll have a chance to see him again in the future. Don't worry, Master. We'll meet again if we're fated. Furthermore, I've already taken note of what he told me. I'll take care of Master's body." Elder Lu said slowly. Fortunately, he had left the prescription and taught him the acupuncture technique, so he did not have to worry too much about the patriarch's health. It's just that we haven't had the chance to thank him properly. Old Master Lu still felt guilty in his heart. This illness was cured by him, but he didn't even receive the consultation fee or any gifts. This thought if there's a chance in the future, it won't be too late to thank him. Elder Lu said with a smile. "Besides, I think we'll definitely meet again in the future." While they were talking about Feng Jiu, on the other hand, Feng Jiu was walking around the market with the little white tiger in her arms. After much difficulty, she finally found a dairy goat. She couldn't help but squeeze it, and the goat's milk spurted out. She couldn't help but grin when she saw this. "Quick, quick, suck it. Eat until you're full." She carried the little tiger in her arms and urged it to quickly drink the goat's milk. Although the little tiger looked silly, it was very cooperative. Its eyes darted around, and it immediately opened its mouth to gulp down the milk. After a while, its stomach was bloated. Chapter 1809. Feng Jiu saw a large man running towards them, glaring angrily. She grabbed the tiger cub and wanted to run. "Go, go. They're coming." Who would have thought that the little tiger cub would not let go of the ewe as if it hadn't had enough? Being hugged and pulled, it actually hurt the ewe as well. A sharp cry was instantly heard. Bah! Ewes' cries were usually gentle, but at this moment, there was a hint of sadness. The ewe wanted to retreat, but it couldn't. It could only bleat in pain. Bah! The tiger cub seemed to be very interested in the scene. It even mimicked the U and made a bleeding sound, which made Feng Jio's face twitch. The moment the tiger cub opened its mouth, Feng Jio held it in her arms and quickly ran into the crowd. "Brat, don't run." The large man behind them glared and scolded angrily. He looked back at his U and scolded it again. Then, he led the U forward. Feng Jiu stopped after running into an alley. After patting her chest, she couldn't help but be stunned. She patted her head and said, "Really, why did I run? I could have just taken out the money and given it to him. I'm so stupid." Bah! Suddenly, the sound of a sheep's bleating came from her arms. Feng Jiu was startled. She looked down and couldn't help but feel speechless. Bah! Bah bah bah! The tiger cub seemed to have found something fun. It started to bleat like a sheep, wagging its tail excitedly. It even rubbed its head against Feng Jiu's chest as if it was asking for praise. "Bah! Bah your head!" Feng Jiu slapped the tiger's head. "You're a white tiger. Why are you bleating like a sheep? Don't you have any ambition? The king of the forest bleating like a sheep? If your mother heard this, she'd be pissed." Bah! Still, she glared and raised her hand to hit the tiger cub. The tiger cub shrank back and looked at her innocently. "Oh, whoa!" It burped again. Seeing this, Feng Jiu laughed. She reached out and rubbed its round belly. "You're so full? Go play in the dimension." Then, seeing that there was no one around, she put the white tiger into the dimension. She straightened her clothes, then carried the medicine basket on her back and walked out of the alley. She wandered around the city, looking around. Treasure Trove Building. Feng Jiu stood in front of an imposing and luxurious building. She looked up at the 3 large words on the building and then looked at the people walking inside. They were either cultivators or people in extraordinary clothes. Seeing this, she straightened her clothes and wanted to walk in as well. "What are you doing?" But before he could enter, he was stopped by someone. She pointed inside. "Let's go in and take a look." "Where do you think this place? You think anyone can just go in and look around?" The guard at the door waved her away with a look of disdain. "Are there rules here?" She couldn't help but ask. She looked around again, but couldn't see anything special. Moreover, looking at the people who went in, other than their clothes being more luxurious, there was nothing special about them. "You want to go in and take a look without knowing the rules? Hurry up and leave. Otherwise, I'll beat you up." The guard waved his fist in front of Feng Jiu's face threateningly. Chapter 1810. However, before she could speak, she heard a voice behind her. "Didn't I tell you to wait for me? Why did you leave so quickly?" A gray-robed old man slowly walked over. After glancing at Feng Jiu, he said to the guards, "He came with me. So it's Elder Tan." The 2 guards recognized the old man and bowed. After glancing at Feng Jiu, they retreated to the side. Feng Jiu stood there in a daze and looked at the gray-robed old man strangely. "Let's go," the old man said and walked in. Seeing this, she didn't say anything and followed him. It was just entering a building. She didn't expect it to be so troublesome. What kind of rules were there? Who was this old man? Why was he helping her? The Trove of Treasures building is a place for bartering. There aren't any rules for entering. It's just that some snobs are used to looking down on people. Seeing that you don't have anything on you and your clothes are plain, they won't let you in. The old man seemed to know what Feng Jiu was thinking and slowly explained after entering. He stopped and looked at Feng Jiu, then glanced at the medicine basket Feng Jiu was carrying. "You're a herb gatherer, right? If you want to see it, feel free to look around. This old man still has matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving first." He didn't ask for Feng Jiu's name, nor did he tell Feng Jiu who he was. He only turned and left after leaving behind his words. Feng Jiu raised her eyebrows, and the corners of her lips curled into a smile. This old man was cold on the outside, but kind on the inside. He was a stern old man, yet he was willing to help someone he didn't even know. She shook her head inwardly and walked in, intending to look around. A place for bartering? What good things could there be in here? He walked inside with some curiosity. When he got inside, he saw a lot of things displayed in transparent cabinets. Every item was labeled with what it was used for, and what it was to be exchanged for. It was clear at a glance. After walking around, she didn't find anything that caught her eye. However, when she was walking around, she noticed that there was a pair of eyes staring at her. That feeling of staring at a prey made her frown slightly. After coming here, she had kept a low profile. She had hidden her appearance and suppressed her cultivation. Now, in the eyes of outsiders, she was just a handsome young man. There were plenty of such people on the streets, and they wouldn't attract much attention. Why would someone target her? She didn't look for the gaze that had landed on her. Instead, she walked to a counter that had some accessories and some ordinary magic tools. "Let me take a look at this mirror," she said to a woman behind the counter. The woman only glanced at Fengjiu and handed the mirror over, saying, "This is a refractive mirror. It's more suitable for women to carry around. It's a mirror and also a magic tool that can refract sunlight to attack." Fengjiu used the mirror to check the person who was staring at her. Through the mirror, she saw an old man in embroidered clothes standing on the second floor, staring at her. The gaze that looked like it was staring at a prey came from this old man. Chapter 1811. "Yes, it's an upper-grade foundation-building elixir," the woman said, deliberately emphasizing the word upper grade. Fengjiu smiled. Ordinary foundation-building elixirs could be found everywhere in the aristocratic families of the upper continent. However, upper-grade foundation-building elixirs had very few impurities and were even more precious. Ordinary alchemists could only produce one upper-grade foundation-building elixir in 100 foundation-building elixirs. Therefore, although this mirror was a magic tool, it was not worth it to exchange it for an upper-grade foundation-building elixir. I want an upper-grade foundation-building elixir," she said regretfully. She touched the mirror and handed it back. "I don't have an upper-grade one. I only have a low-grade one." The woman smiled and took back the mirror without saying anything. She did not seem surprised. Fengjiu turned around and was about to leave when a middle-aged man came to her side. "Little brother, please wait." Fengjiu looked at the man in front of her. He was obviously blocking her way with half of his body. This action made her a little unhappy, but she did not show it on her face. "What's the matter?" "Little brother, I'm the manager here. Can I have a word with you?" The middle-aged man made a please gesture and wanted to take Fengjiu to the back. At this moment, the old man who came in with Fengjiu was about to leave. He caught a glimpse of this scene from the corner of his eye, and his expression changed slightly. He immediately stepped forward and shouted at Fengjiu, "Didn't I tell you to follow me? Why are you running around after entering this place? You really don't know the rules." He hurriedly said to the middle-aged man, "Butler Wang, this is my grandnephew. If he offends you in any way, please don't take offense." The middle-aged man saw this, and his eyes flashed slightly. He glanced at the second floor and then smiled at Elder Tan. "So this little brother is Elder Tan's grandnephew. If there's nothing else, Butler Wang will take our leave first." As he spoke, he cupped his hands and bowed, then motioned for Fengjiu to leave with him. Fengjiu didn't say anything when she saw this. She quietly followed behind the old man and left. When they were outside, she could still feel that the gray-clothed old man's body was tense. He seemed to be nervous. She followed them quietly and did not say anything. She left halfway because someone was following them. After walking through a few streets and entering an alley, they turned into a small courtyard. After closing the door, the gray-robed old man entered the house and let out a sigh of relief. Only then did he look at Fengjiu with a frown. "Young man, are you from out of town?" "I just came down from the mountain," Fengjiu said with an honest smile. The old man sized up Feng Nine. He saw that this young man was handsome and had a simple and honest appearance. In addition, his strength was only in the foundation establishment stage, and he was dressed simply. With just one look, he knew that he was not from an aristocratic family. It was no wonder that Steward Wang had his eyes on him. That Trove of Treasures building is not a good place. Don't go there again. He then said, "If you're just passing by, leave this city as soon as possible to avoid any trouble." What kind of trouble? She could not help but be curious. Although nothing had happened, the old man seemed to be very worried that she would be taken away by Butler Wang. This made her curious. Why was she being watched? Also, why was she being watched? Chapter 1812. Fengjiu followed him out. Only then did he notice that the courtyard was filled with herbs. Furthermore, there were some grinding tools in the courtyard. It seemed that this old man was a pharmacist. Grandpa Tan, are you the only one in your house? Fengjiu looked around and saw that he seemed to be the only one in the courtyard. The old man replied as he arranged the herbs on the shelf, ignoring Fengjiu. Fengjiu sat down in the middle of the courtyard, one hand propping up his chin. His eyes darted around as he stared at the figure who was arranging the herbs with his back facing him. In his heart, he wondered if the Trove of Treasures building was doing some shady business in the dark. And who was that old man on the second floor at that time? Why haven't you left yet? After about an hour, the old man turned around and glanced at the youth sitting on the stairs in the courtyard. He frowned. Why haven't you left yet? Leave where to? Fengjiu blinked and asked. Back to your house, the old man said. Hearing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but smile. His eyes narrowed into a line as he looked at the old man with a smile. Grandpa Tan, didn't you say so? I'm your grandnephew. I came here this time to seek refuge with you. Hearing this, the old man was speechless for a while. This old man was saving you for you. Why did he still blame it on him? Saving me? But I didn't see any danger. Fengjiu smiled foolishly. When the old man heard this, he felt a lump in his chest. He didn't say anything else and only glanced at Fengjiu before turning around and entering the room. Fengjiu stood up and patted the dust off his green clothes as he followed behind the old man. Grandpa, there are 2 rooms in this courtyard. Is this one for me to stay in? She didn't stand on ceremony and pushed open the door to look inside. The room was neat and tidy, and everything needed was there. However, the room seemed to have been empty for a long time as the table was covered in a layer of dust. In the evening, at the stone table in the courtyard, the old man stared at the few dishes in front of him in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. He glanced at Fengjiu before picking up his chopsticks and eating with a straight face. Grandpa Tan, eat more. Fengjiu gave the old man some food. Grandpa Tan was already a cultivator in the middle stage of the fairy realm. His strength was considered very strong. But why did he suppress his strength? This was just on a whim. She felt that this old man. Therefore, for the next 2 days, she slept until she woke up naturally during the day and went out to buy groceries. She also bought some goat's milk for the baby tiger. When she was free, she would go to the old man's stall to help look after it. To put it bluntly, she just sat there and watched the old man do business. After Grandpa Tan ground the spiritual herbs into powder, he mixed them into some commonly used medicinal powder and sold them at the medicine stall in the market. Occasionally, he would bring 1 or 2 bottles to the Trove of Treasures building to barter. On the day he met her, Grandpa Tan took the medicine to barter. However, after that day, he didn't go to the Trove of Treasures building for the next 2 days. Some people who were familiar with him saw that Grandpa Tan was the only one sitting at the stall with a straight face. Now, there was a handsome young man sitting beside him. They couldn't help but ask with a smile, Grandpa Tan, who is this young man? Chapter 1813. Uncle, do you want to buy 2 bottles of medicine to protect yourself? They're new medicines that were just ground today. There are all kinds. Fengjiu asked with a smile. It's fine. I still have some from last time. The middle-aged man waved his hand and left. When Fengjiu saw this, she propped her chin on her hand and looked at the busy market. Then, she looked at the old man beside her and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. She had been sitting here for half a day, but there wasn't a single person buying medicine. This kind of business was really bleak. Just then, her stomach grumbled. She glanced at the old man beside her and smiled embarrassedly. I'm a little hungry. Seeing this, Elder Tan took out a fruit from his sleeve and handed it to Fengjiu. Eat. No need. No need. Grandpa Tan, you eat. Before she could finish speaking, the fruit was stuffed into her hand. She looked at the fruit in her hand and then looked at the old man who had already turned his head away. She couldn't help but smile and didn't refuse. Grandpa Tan, what do you want to eat tonight? Why don't we go to the street and buy a few kilograms of spiced beef to eat tonight, and a few kilograms of good wine? Before he could speak, Fengjiu stood up. Since I have nothing to do, I'll go buy it now. I'll be back in a while. Feng Jiu walked to the street as she spoke. When Elder Tan saw this, he didn't say anything. He just sat there quietly and waited for the person who wanted to buy medicine to come to him. After leaving the stall, Feng Jiu's eyes flashed with a faint light. When she raised her head again, there was only clarity and honesty in her eyes. She turned a few corners and walked to the street. After buying a few kilograms of spiced beef, she was about to walk back when she saw Butler Wong, whom she had met once before, walk out of the crowd. Hee, little brother, what a coincidence. You're also here to buy spiced beef. Looking at the person walking in front of her with a smile and greeting her like an acquaintance, Feng Jiu couldn't help but raise the corners of her mouth and grin. So it's Steward Wong. I haven't told you what I said last time, but you were taken away by Elder Tan. I've been thinking about it for the past 2 days. Butler Wong said with a smile. You have something to say to me? Feng Jiu blinked his eyes, his face full of innocence. Say it. I'm listening. There are a lot of people here, I wonder if. He smiled and pointed at an alley not far away. Sure. She responded with a smile and followed him into the alley. However, when they reached the alley, they smelled a faint fragrance. As soon as he smelled that fragrance, Feng Jiu's footsteps faltered. Why do I feel a little dizzy? She murmured as her body swayed and fell to the ground. Butler Wong looked at the youth on the ground and chuckled. He called out softly, Little brother? Little brother. When he saw that there was no movement, the smile on his face disappeared. He ordered the air, take him away. A man in black appeared out of nowhere. He was as fast as a ghost. He took out a sack and wrapped Feng Jiu in it, then carried him back. On the other side, Elder Tan sat and waited. However, he still didn't see Feng Jiu come back. He couldn't help but frown. Why was he gone for so long? Could something have happened to him? Chapter 1814. Brother Qingyi, right? Yes. He left after buying a few kilograms of beef. The shopkeeper said. Hearing this, Elder Tan thanked him and hurried back home. Who knew that when he reached home, the youth was nowhere to be seen? He couldn't help but frown. Where could he have gone? Could it be the Trove of Treasures building? Thinking of this, he shook his head. It shouldn't be. It's just a youth. Why would they still keep an eye on him after 2 days? Moreover, there's nothing unusual these 2 days. But if it wasn't them, who could it be? If he really fell into the hands of the Trove of Treasures building, I'm afraid. He muttered softly, looked at the sky, and paced back and forth in the courtyard. He didn't have any evidence. Even if it was really the Trove of Treasures building who kidnapped him, they wouldn't admit it. Forcing his way in wouldn't work. He could only wait until the sky turned dark to investigate. Although the Trove of Treasures building was a place for bartering, there were also some shady dealings in the dark. Some clans and forces naturally knew a little, but due to the power of the Trove of Treasures building, no one dared to ask. And he had been here for so long. Naturally, he knew a thing or two. When he opened his mouth to let the youth enter the Trove of Treasures building, he didn't think too much, but he didn't expect that he would be targeted by the Trove of Treasures building. Thinking of how he had been alone for so many years, but the youth had been by his side these 2 days, and even cooked for him, these simple and not worth mentioning trifles, to an old man like him, it gave him a different feeling. After living in seclusion for so many years, he had no choice but to make a move now. He could only hope that the youth could hold on. On the other side, Feng Jiu, who was covered in a gunny sack, had long opened her eyes. With her body that was immune to poison, how could a mere bone-softening smoke put her down? She only wanted to beat them at their own game, to see what the person who had been watching her for 2 days wanted to do. Accurately speaking, what did that luxuriously dressed old man want to do? The surroundings were quiet, but she could feel that there were many practitioners who had concealed their auras guarding. She closed her eyes in the gunny sack until she was thrown to the ground and the gunny sack was taken off. Only, the smell in the air didn't seem too good. It's this kid? There's nothing special about him. Why did Elder Feng have to capture him? There's no one that Elder Feng can't get his hands on. I want to catch this kid that day, but I let him go in the end. If I can't do it in the open, I'll do it in the dark. Anyway, I just have to bring him back to Elder Feng. Their voices drifted further and further away. Feng Jiu rested for a while before opening his eyes. However, When he saw where he was, he couldn't help but be surprised. This was indeed a room, but it could also be said to be a cage. There was nothing in this room except for an iron cage made of black iron. Perhaps it was because there was no sunlight all year round, but there was a moldy smell inside, which was not very pleasant. At this moment, a few old men were seated in a circle at the top floor of the treasure-gathering pavilion. 3 of them looked at the old man in luxurious clothes with puzzlement and asked, "Elder Fong, what exactly is so special about that young man? You have to know that we are very careful when choosing people. Don't let any accidents happen." Chapter 18:15. It's just that even if we usually pick some people, it's extremely secretive. Moreover, most of their backgrounds are investigated thoroughly. Now, have you really sent people to investigate thoroughly? Will there be any problems? After all, we can't afford to be careless in this matter. As the old man spoke, he looked at Elder Fong. His eyes were still filled with unconcealable worry. The corners of Elder Feng's mouth twitched as he revealed a cold smile. This brat should have come from some countryside. However, he met Old Man Tan that day, and Old Man Tan protected him, saying that he was his grandnephew. Hearing this, the few people looked at each other and asked, "So that means the kid is from the countryside and has never seen the world? There's no potential trouble?" In my opinion, that's the case. However, since you don't believe me, you can give it a try. Elder Fong sneered. "We're in the dark, and he's in the light. Isn't it easy to observe a person?" Hearing this, the few people pondered for a while and couldn't help but ask, "What's so special about this kid? We don't need one more person, so why do we have to drag him in?" They were a little worried about having such an unknown person around. Didn't I say it? I believe my judgment of people is never wrong. Elder Fong glanced at them and said, "All right, let's leave it at that." Looking at the time, the kid should be awake. Let's go and take a look. Therefore, the few people followed him and left the top floor. Feng Jiao, who was staying in the metal room, heard the footsteps outside. Her expression changed slightly, and the cunning and wisdom in her eyes disappeared. She blinked her silly eyes, and her face was filled with panic and fear. She hugged her legs with both hands and shrank into a corner. The door opened, and the few people who walked in saw the kid in the corner with panic and fear in his eyes. He clearly looked scared, but he was trying to be strong. He tried hard to calm down, but he didn't know that his trembling body had already revealed his helplessness and fear. Elder Fong, who came in, glanced at the few people beside him. His gaze seemed to say, "Look, didn't I say he's just a country kid? There's nothing to be afraid of." When they saw the expression and appearance of the young man huddled in the corner, they felt relieved. As long as there was no potential danger or trouble, everything else was fine. Who are you? Why do you want to capture me?" Feng Jiao asked in a trembling voice, playing the role of a country bumpkin to perfection. His foundation, establishment cultivation, is a little weak among those people, an old man said, his gaze sweeping over Feng Jiao's body. "It doesn't matter. As long as we enter that place, no matter how weak we are, we will still be stronger than those outside." Another person said, "That's true. We have prepared a lot of good things for this group of elites." Last time, there was a foundation establishment cultivator who killed a cultivator at the peak of the gold core stage. That really gave us a big surprise. The time given by the higher-ups is 1 year. We have to train them in 1 year. It's about time to start. Just like that, they stood in front of Feng Jiao in disgust, as if they weren't worried that the young man would overhear the information in their conversation. Perhaps it was because they were confident that once they entered, it was impossible to leave. Chapter 18:16. You've seen him. If you don't have any objections, get someone to take him away tomorrow. Elder Fong said to the people around him. All right." They nodded and turned to leave. The door closed again, leaving Feng Jiao alone. Sensing that they had left, Feng Jiao's eyes flickered. She pondered. What were they talking about? What elites? Who was the master behind the Endless Treasures Pavilion? From their words, she could tell that they didn't know her identity. Then, they didn't know why she was Feng Jiao. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but be curious. Where would they take her tomorrow? That night, she didn't think too much about it. Anyway, no matter where she was, as long as she wanted to leave, she would definitely be able to leave. It was impossible for these people to trap her. After all, they would never have imagined that she was a peak sage immortal powerhouse. However, in the middle of the night, she opened her eyes in the darkness. Who was it? Why wasn't he sleeping and moving about on the roof in the middle of the night? At that moment, she didn't expect it to be Elder Tan. After all, she wasn't related to Elder Tan. She couldn't have imagined that Elder Tan would risk exposing his strength and cultivation to sneak into Endless Treasures Pavilion at night. She closed her eyes, but no longer felt sleepy. She quietly lay on the wall and waited for dawn. However, after about half an hour, a faint voice came from the roof of the house she was in. "Kid, kid." When she heard that voice, Feng Jiu was slightly startled. She raised her head in astonishment. Grandpa Tan. With the help of the night sky above, she saw the person lying on the roof. It was Elder Tan. "Wait here, I'll get you out." As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Tan, who was lying on the roof, left. Not long after, he pushed open the front door and entered. Elder Tan frowned when he saw the scene inside. He didn't say anything and was about to break the lock. Unexpectedly, Feng Jiu stopped him at that moment. "Wait." Feng Jiu stepped forward to stop him. She looked at the old man in front of her and sighed inwardly. "Grandpa Tan, hurry up and leave. I'm fine here. You don't have to save me." "Do you know what you're saying? If I don't save you, it won't be long before you die," Elder Tan said with a straight face. He wanted to open the lock, but he realized that it was a black iron lock. Without a key, even a sword couldn't cut it open. "I know." Feng Jiu revealed a smile. This smile was different from his usual simple and honest one. It was a shrewd and cunning smile. "I saw that they had their eyes on me, so I played along and came in to take a look. I just didn't expect Grandpa Tan to find me." Looking at the shrewd and cunning expression of the young man locked in the iron room, Elder Tan was slightly startled. "You. That's why I said it's okay. When I don't want to stay here anymore, I'll naturally leave. I can protect myself." "Grandpa Tan, you don't have to worry about me." She smiled as she spoke. Her voice paused for a moment before she continued. "Grandpa Tan, you should hurry and leave before they find out. Tomorrow, they will transfer me. I want to see what kind of place this treasure trove building is." Elder Tan looked at Feng Jiu with a complicated expression and finally asked, "Have you really decided to stay here?" Feng Jiu nodded. He smiled and narrowed his eyes. "Since I have nothing to do, I'll take a look." Chapter 1817. Not long after Elder Tan left, two men in black came in. They glanced at Feng Jiu, who was in the metal room, and went forward to open the black iron lock of the metal room. They went forward and directly put a black bag on Feng Jiu's head, took her, and walked out. In the dark, Elder Tan watched and sighed softly. In the end, he shook his head and quietly left, his figure disappearing into the night. Feng Jiu only felt that she was being pushed by the two men. She couldn't see clearly and didn't know where she was being taken until she was brought into a transportation array by the two men. Because of the dense, spiritual aura of the array, even if she couldn't see, she could feel it. She was even more surprised. Did this treasure trove building have a transportation array? Wasn't it just moving her to another place? Why do they need to use a transportation array? Although she was surprised, she didn't say anything. These two men were only in charge of escorting her. Even if she asked, it would be a waste of time. Her arms were held by the two men in black, under a strong suction force. Even if she couldn't see, she could feel the world spinning. Her feet didn't touch the ground, as if she had entered a transportation space. After spinning for a while, her feet stepped on the ground again. What hit her in the face was a different aura. It was the smell of blood, a bloodthirsty and ferocious aura. She heard the sound of swords clashing and a low shout. The black bag over her head was removed, and she saw the scene in front of her clearly. It was a huge square. The ground was covered with yellow sand, without any green leaves or grass. There were a few iron cages around the square, in which were sleeping ferocious beasts. At the side of the square, there were a few men sitting on the ground. Some of those people were teenagers, some were young men in their 20s, and some were men in their 30s. There were all kinds of people, but they all had the same vigilance and ruthlessness. When she suddenly appeared here, those people narrowed their bloodthirsty eyes and sized her up. Then, they coldly looked away. Go! The two black-clothed men beside her pushed her, and she could only follow them. With a face full of fear, she followed the two black-clothed men around the square to a house behind a mountain. It was a simple and crude house, but it was the best place to be. Other than the few powerful demonic cultivators guarding outside the house, the people inside the house seemed to have unfathomable strength. Elder Ghost, there's a new kid. The two men in black who were escorting her stood respectfully outside the door and saluted. Without the permission of the people inside, they didn't even dare to enter. Didn't you say it's about time? Why did you send someone here? An enigmatic voice came from inside. The voice was soft and feminine, but it made people's hearts tremble like a venomous snake. Replying to Senior Gay, Senior Feng asked me to bring him here. He said that this fellow is simple and honest. If he is properly trained, he might be of great use. Really? Bring it in and let me have a look. The voice came from inside again, and Feng Jiu was dragged in by the two men. After entering, Feng Jiu swallowed her saliva. Her body trembled slightly, and her face was pale as she looked at the person lying on the soft couch. It was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s. However, his body was thin and small, as if a gust of wind could blow him away. Even his face was thin and long, with a mix of green and white. It looked very weak. Chapter 1818. In the embrace of this cold, tall, and skinny middle-aged man, there was currently a half-naked enchanting woman. The woman meekly nestled beside him. Her body was exposed, but she was not afraid of the gazes of others. Instead, under the teasing of Elder Ghost's hands, she even let out a low moan. The two black-clothed men who came in didn't dare to raise their heads. They didn't even dare to look, as if they were afraid that they would get into trouble. As for Fengjiu, her face was pale as she stared blankly. Her gaze carried just the right amount of fear. No matter how one looked at it, she was a young man who was so scared that he didn't know how to react. Seeing the ghost elder's bloodthirsty eyes move around her body and size her up, she didn't move at all. She only swallowed her saliva. Where is this? I want to go home. Go home? Ha! The ghost elder seemed to have heard something funny and let out a sinister laugh. After entering the palace of the King of Hell, you are all little ghosts under my command. Go home. Ha ha! Wishful thinking. When the sinister voice fell, he suddenly flicked his hand, and a stream of air landed on Fengjiu's body. In that instant, Fengjiu instinctively wanted to attack, but she still forcibly endured it. Because the stream of air landed on her body, she instinctively let out an ah sound. She opened her mouth slightly, and the ghost elder flicked a pill into her mouth. Ugh! She clutched her throat with both hands and made an appearance as if she wanted to vomit the medicine out. The moment she lowered her head, bent her waist, and opened her mouth to vomit, she caught a glimpse of the waist tag that Elder Ghost dropped on the ground. When she saw the waist tag, her pupils shrank, and in almost an instant, she covered up the abnormality in her eyes. Take him out. The people outside will teach him the rules. The ghost elder waved his hand and said. He narrowed his eyes and no longer paid attention to them. Instead, he teased the woman in his embrace, causing her to laugh. When they arrived outside, the two black-clothed men pushed Fengjiu onto the plaza and turned around to report back. When the two people left, Fengjiu pretended to cough and spat out the pill under her tongue and put it away. Although she didn't eat it, she knew that it was the poison that controlled these people. Although her body was immune to poison, it was best not to eat this kind of thing. Moreover, she also wanted to research what kind of poison it was. She walked on the plaza. Because the sky wasn't very bright, the light wasn't very good. In addition, these people's faces were either covered in mud or dry blood, so she couldn't see their faces too clearly. However, what was certain was that none of them were easy to provoke like wild animals. Their eyes gave off a bloodthirsty aura. It was as if they would pounce on her if she dared take one step closer, and they would tear her. Finding an empty corner, she curled up into a ball and hugged her legs as she looked around and the people around her. Looking at this scene and then at these people, she suddenly understood where she was. However, in this place, other than those people who were devil cultivators, the majority of the people here weren't devil cultivators like her. Moreover, when she glanced at the waist tag, she saw the words Temple of Darkness engraved on it. Chapter 18-19. In the darkness of the night, a blood-curdling scream suddenly rang out. Immediately after, she, who was sitting in a corner, saw two devil cultivators dragging a man who was on the verge of death over and pushing an iron cage to the center of the square. She saw that the man's shoulder had been slashed, and fresh blood kept flowing. He was pressed to the ground by two devil cultivators, who used a dagger to cut off the back of his foot. A mournful scream rang out once again, breaking the silence of the night. The two devil cultivators pushed the man who had his foot cut off into the cage that held the ferocious beast. Immediately after, under the gazes of the surrounding people, the ferocious beast in the cage tore the man apart, and the man's mournful and sharp screams, the bloody scene of the internal organs being hollowed out, happened just like that in front of them. The surroundings were so quiet that not a single sound could be heard. Only the heavy breathing of those who saw this scene could be heard. This is the result of running away. Take a good look and remember it well. Once you're here, don't even mention the fact that you can't escape from our palms. Even if you can't escape from this place. The devil cultivator's fierce voice carried a strong warning as it spread through the air, clearly entering everyone's ears. Seeing everyone's stiff expressions, the two devil cultivators snorted and turned to leave, leaving only the bloody scene in the iron cage that held the ferocious beast. As the sky gradually brightened, several devil cultivators followed behind Elder Ghost and walked over. They only stopped when they reached the center of the square. The ghost doctor's cold gaze swept across everyone in the square, and only then did his voice ring out. "Everyone, gather here." As soon as the voice rang out, everyone consciously stood up and walked to the front. The bloody cage in the middle of the square had already been moved to the side. Fengjiu also walked forward with those people. However, among the nearly 400 people, she probably looked the thinnest and smallest. She couldn't squeeze to the front, so she could only stand at the back and listen. Some of you have been here for 3 or 4 months, and some of you have just entered. There are a total of 378 of you, and there are those who are in their teens to 30s. Then, do you know why you were captured here? Elder Ghost's sinister voice rang out in the square, but no one spoke. They all quietly listened and watched. You don't know? If you don't know, I'll tell you. His voice suddenly became vicious as he shouted in a low voice. Among the 378 of you, only the one who survives will be qualified to become a spy for the Temple of Darkness. You are the spies that want to infiltrate the 4 great sects. Are you wondering why I told you that you're a spy for the 4 major sects? Ha! Elder Gue laughed sinisterly. That's because we don't need too many spies. We'll have rounds of death and elimination. You won't be able to escape from here. If you don't want to die, then you can only fight. You can only try your best to think of a way to survive. Otherwise, what awaits you will only be a hair-raising death. I believe that after seeing the way the eliminated person died, you all would definitely not wish for the eliminated person to be yourselves. Fengjiu, who was standing at the back of the crowd, couldn't help but frown when he heard this. Elimination by death? A spy sent to the 4 major sects? What was the Temple of Darkness trying to do? Chapter 18-20. The newcomer, come over here. Once Elder Ghost's voice came out from the front, everyone followed his line of sight and landed on the skinny youth in green clothes at the very back. In their eyes, this youth was the weakest among all of them. Fengjiu, who was standing at the very back, saw everyone's gazes land on him. He hesitated for a moment before walking forward with some fear. Perhaps it was because of Elder Ghost's words, but the people blocking the way all moved to the side to make a path for him. "WH, what are you doing?" Fengjiu asked with a trembling voice. He looked at Elder Ghost with a very weak expression and his legs trembled slightly. Nothing. Elder Ghost narrowed his small eyes and revealed a sinister sneer. You look like a soft-footed shrimp, but that old thing still brought you in. Since it's like this, I naturally have to treat you a little differently. When everyone heard this, they all had different expressions. No one knew what they were thinking. Fengjiu waved his hand and suppressed the fear on his face. He said embarrassedly, "No, you don't have to treat me special. I'll be the same as everyone else." This old thing, with his sinister smile, it was obvious that he was up to no good. Elder Ghost narrowed his eyes and stared at Fengjiu. He laughed sinisterly. "Wait until you pass this stage. This death elimination will start with you." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand, and a ferocious beast appeared beside him. Roar! It was a ferocious beast at the peak of the holy beast level. It was ferocious and was called the demonic corroding tiger. It was different from the commonly seen tiger species. This demonic corroding tiger's fur was as hard as iron. Two sharp tiger fangs that were about the length of a finger protruded from its mouth. There were 3 red patterns on the left and right sides of the tiger's face. Its bloodthirsty eyes revealed a ferocity that made one's heart tremble. This was Elder Ghost's contracted beast, a ferocious beast that was only 1 step away from becoming a divine beast. Now, he had summoned it just like that. When everyone saw this ferocious beast, their eyes flashed, and they could not help but take a few steps back. They stared at the demonic corroding tiger in a defensive manner. Elder Ghost had suddenly summoned this demonic corroding tiger. Even the strongest person among them would find it difficult to fight this ferocious beast alone. However, at this moment, some people's gazes fell on Fengjiu with complicated expressions. They saw that the green-clothed youth standing at the front had a confused expression. His body trembled, and his face was pale as he stared with his eyes and mouth wide open as he stared at the ferocious beast that had suddenly appeared in front of him. He did not know whether he was scared or not, as he did not know how to retreat. Or not. The ghost elder squinted his eyes and rubbed the head of the corroding demon tiger beside him. His eyes, however, stared at Fengjiu sinisterly. "Go, bite off this brat's leg." As soon as she finished speaking, the corrosive devil tiger let out a ferocious roar. Its entire body shot forward, its mouth wide open, revealing its sharp, bloodthirsty fangs as it pounced towards Fengjiu. Fengjiu stared blankly. She stared blankly until she heard Elder Ghost's words. When she saw the majestic and ferocious corroding devil tiger roar and pounce at her with its mouth wide open and its fangs bared, she let out a sharp and panicked scream as if she was frightened. Her voice was sharp and ear-piercing. It carried with it the pressure of a Foundation establishment cultivator. It suddenly rang out and pierced through everyone's eardrums while they were still in shock. Their eardrums hurt, and their hearts suddenly jumped. Chapter 1821. Roar! The devil-corroding tiger missed its target and suddenly stopped in its tracks. The dust and smoke that it had kicked up as it charged forward had instantly obstructed its vision. When it could see clearly, its eyes were filled with rage. A puny human had actually dared to escape from its mouth. He was truly audacious. At that moment, it quickly turned around and swept its ferocious gaze around. Its gaze fell on the green figure that was screaming while running forward. Without waiting for its master's orders, it roared angrily and pounced forward with its 4 hooves. Roar! The ferocious beast's furious roar was accompanied by the green-robed youth's panic scream. Seeing the youth being chased by a ferocious beast, the 300 or so people were all dumbfounded. That youth was only at the Foundation establishment stage. That ferocious beast was at the peak of the holy beast stage. How had that youth managed to escape from the tiger's mouth? Now, he was running around the entire plaza. That ferocious beast had chased him round and round, yet it still hadn't managed to bite him. Seeing the sand in the plaza being kicked up by the man and the tiger, creating rings of sand and dust that blurred their vision, they couldn't help but return to their senses and look at the spectral elder in front of them. Did the spectral elder really release his contracted ferocious beast to take the youth's life? Although the people here were all savage and inhumane, didn't they say that they were going to be trained as spies? Even if they were going to be eliminated by death, they shouldn't be using such a brutal and direct method, right? Forget about the skinny, green-robed youth. Even the strongest among them probably wouldn't be able to escape from the ferocious beast's mouth. The green-robed youth hadn't been bitten to death, yet only because he still had some strength left. Once his strength was almost depleted, it would probably be a bloody scene. Seeing this, the spectral elder's eyes narrowed as a glint flashed through them. His gaze stared at the green-robed youth who was running around the plaza in a panic as he pondered. The pressure that emanated from the youth was indeed only that of a Foundation establishment cultivator. Even as he ran and screamed in panic, the pressure that emanated from his voice was indeed that of a Foundation establishment cultivator. Furthermore, there didn't seem to be anything strange about his running. The path he was running in was all panicked, and his footsteps were just common steps. If there was anything special about him, it would be that he ran faster than others. How should he put it? How should he describe it? He thought for a moment, and a thought flashed through his mind. That's right, this young man's current appearance was like a frightened rabbit, scurrying around in a panic under the tiger's mouth. Roar! The eroding devil tiger and the twin tigers were on the verge of spitting fire. Each roar was louder and louder than the last. There was a sense of defeat in their hearts, but there was also a burning anger. Damned humans! Damned young man! He ran faster than a rabbit. It did not believe that it could not catch up to him. Help! Help! Don't bite me! Don't bite me! Feng Jiu shouted in panic as he ran. He was panting, and his speed seemed to have slowed down. His green robe fluttered in the wind as he ran. The corrosive devil tiger behind him pounced and almost bit down on the robe. Instead, it ate a mouthful of sand and became even more frenzied. Roar! Humans! This king, and you are irreconcilable. Chapter 1822. However, at that moment, the young man who had fallen to the ground somehow mustered up his courage. He bent his leg and fiercely kicked out. Even though he was a Foundation establishment cultivator, if that kick had landed on the corroding demon tiger's body or leg, it wouldn't have had much of an effect. However, that kick had landed on the weakest part of the body that both men and beasts couldn't handle. Naturally, the effect was different. Oh, a shrill cry of agony came from the mouth of the corroding demon tiger that had pounced forward. Because that kick had landed on an important part of its body, it couldn't muster any strength in its body. It was in so much pain that it shrank to a tenth of its size. Immediately after, there was the sound of it falling heavily to the ground. Bang! That corroding demon tiger half curled up and pounced forward. However, its posture was a little different, because it had retracted its front claws and clamped its hind legs tightly together as it pounced to the ground. Furthermore, after it pounced to the ground, it only let out a pained howl. Its hind legs were still trembling slightly, as if it was enduring some kind of intense pain in its spine. Seeing this scene, the corners of everyone's mouths twitched slightly. They subconsciously clamped their legs together, faintly feeling the throbbing pain. A Foundation establishment cultivator had viciously kicked the weakest part of its body. This wasn't something that anyone could withstand. Otherwise, a dignified beast at the peak of the holy beast level wouldn't have curled up on the ground and let out a pained howl. Elder Ghost's eyes flashed slightly. He glanced at the young man who had dodged and fallen to the ground. He was a little surprised. He didn't think that this young man would be able to survive under the claws of his beast. It seemed that Elder Feng had sent this person here for a reason. Perhaps it was because he had taken a fancy to his speed that was different from normal people and his unique trait of not playing by the rules. If that was the case, it would be a pity to let him die like this. Why not? With a wave of his hand, the corroding demon tiger that was lying on the ground disappeared before everyone's eyes. He didn't say anything and just turned around to leave, leaving everyone there to look at each other. Feng Jiu lowered her head slightly and panted heavily. In reality, a cold smile flashed across her lowered eyes. Was she someone who was willing to be taken advantage of? Since she had released that beast and wanted to bite off one of her legs, she would cripple its third leg first. Her kick had at most caused the beast to suffer a little and suffer a little. However, if it wanted to lift its third leg, it would be difficult. Since she wanted to cultivate a spy, she naturally had to have some merit. If she was weak, she would naturally be killed. Since that was the case, she didn't mind, of course. After returning to the wooden house, Elder Ghost allowed the woman behind him to massage his shoulders. He narrowed his eyes and ordered the demonic cultivators that followed him, make the arrangements. Within 3 days, I want to see the people who have been eliminated. Yes, a few demonic cultivators responded, then turned around and walked out. Returning to the square, they gathered everyone and pointed at the forest outside the square. Do you see that forest in front? Go to the other end of the forest in 3 days. Those who don't arrive before sunset, and those who stay in the forest will all die. Bloodthirsty paused, raking through the others. Moreover, they will be dismembered. Chapter 1823. When the 300-plus people heard this, they all fell silent. They were confused about the unknown future. Or it could be said that ever since they were caught and brought here, they had been poisoned and controlled by others. Their lives were no longer their own. Right now, if they didn't want to die, the only thing they could do was to try their best to survive, even if they had to live as spies with a shameful identity. How big is this forest? How long will it take to cross it normally? Are there any weapons or medicine for us to defend ourselves? Is there a map? When we reach the other side of the forest, will there be anyone to pick us up? In the crowd, a man in his 30s asked in a calm voice. A few questions pointed out the most crucial point. While attracting the attention of the demonic cultivators, Fengjiu also glanced at that person. The man in his 30s had a bloodthirsty aura. It could be seen that he was a very iron-blooded person. Even if he was standing, his back was straight. His entire body had an aura like that of a cheetah. Fengjiu was a little surprised that such a person would be captured. It seemed that the strength of the people sent to capture them was not ordinary. One of the demonic cultivators glanced at the crowd and said, "This forest is neither big nor small. Some people can't walk out of it even after a month. Some can naturally walk out of it in 3 days. There will be 2 maps. As for where it is, you'll have to find it in the forest." The voice of the demonic cultivator paused for a moment. He glanced at them and sneered. As for weapons and medicine, before you officially become spies, it's impossible for you to have these things. And the weapons you use in this square are not allowed to be brought into the forest. Violators will die. After giving some instructions, the 300 people were brought to the entrance of the forest. Looking at the weeds that were half the height of a person and the messy trees, Fengjiu couldn't help but sigh. This forest doesn't even seem to have a path. Other than not being able to get lost here, we still have to find a way out and avoid being hunted. These people of the sacred beasts of the night are indeed not good people. She had a feeling that if 378 people went in, there would not even be 78 of them coming out. She knew very well that a spy must be the best of the best. Only those who could avoid danger and survive had the qualifications to become a spy. Moreover, for spies, as long as they were good, it didn't matter how many there were. If those spies made a move in the dark, the death rate would be very high. Although she didn't know any of the people here, she couldn't bear to see them die for no reason, especially when some of them were teenagers. How could a teenager, at such a young age, survive such a cruel elimination of death? Moreover, there were nearly 400 people, but there were only 2 maps. He was afraid that there would be another battle between people once they reached the inner regions. Thinking of this, she gently exhaled. Forget it. She'd better walk a little slower so that she wouldn't become everyone's target if she walked to the front. Therefore, with her intention to fall behind, she gradually separated herself from the group. The people in front of her didn't pay any attention to her. They thought that a thin and weak youth walking in the forest naturally wouldn't be able to walk as fast as on a flat road. Chapter 1824. Many of them became vigilant because they knew that things were not that simple. Those people would not just stop them from moving forward. They would definitely make a move in secret. If that was the case, they had to be careful. Whoosh! The sharp sound of an arrow piercing through the air was heard. With a whoosh, it shot into the group of people. Some of them immediately fell to the ground. Some of them quickly dodged. Some of them fell due to the push and shove. Some of them had their arms cut by the arrow. Only one person was unable to react in time, and the arrow pierced through his heart. That person groaned, his eyes wide open as he fell to the ground. His body twitched slightly, his eyes filled with unwillingness. However, he still breathed his last under the shocked gazes of the people around him. Everyone's hearts beat violently at this moment, as if they were about to jump out of their chests. They knew that things would not be that simple. They did not know when the murderous intent had descended. "Look, there's something," a man shouted, and quickly stepped forward to pull out the arrow. He took a small brocade pouch that was hanging on the arrow and opened it. There was a map inside. "It's a map." He looked at the others and took in their expressions. Finally, he said, "Does anyone have anything to say?" There were about a dozen people here, and there were about a dozen people around. The rest were scattered. He knew very well that this path was not easy to take. At least, if he were to rely on his own strength. He was afraid that he would have to face greater danger. If he could join forces with the others, his chances of survival would be greater. Although these dozens of people were on guard against each other, they were not stupid. It was precisely because they knew that it would be more dangerous to move alone that they had intentionally or unintentionally walked together. Now that they heard this, they looked at each other. "After we get the map, let's all go together. If we encounter danger, we can help each other." One of them said, "I agree." Another person said, "All right, then it's settled. However, who will hold the map?" Hearing this, everyone fell silent again. They looked around and finally fixed their eyes on the person holding the map. "He will hold it. If we go together, it doesn't matter who holds it." However, just as this person finished speaking, 5 demonic cultivators suddenly rushed out and attacked the dozens of people with their swords. The other party's attacks were swift and fierce, making it clear that they wanted to kill them. Moreover, there was no limit to their targets. It was obvious that wherever the tip of their swords pointed, they would kill whoever it was pointed at. What they wanted to do was to disperse these people and eliminate some of them. Only those who could survive would be able to become spies. Therefore, among these 378 people, in their opinion, there would only be less than a dozen people who could survive. "Don't go. Let's join forces to deal with them," one of the men shouted. However, in the face of the sudden killing intent, those people scattered and fled in all directions. Only a few people circulated the spiritual energy in their bodies and waved their fists at those demonic cultivators. Compared to running away and surviving, they wanted to use their fists to survive. The demonic cultivator. Chapter 1825. The 4 of them panted slightly as they looked at the fallen demonic cultivator. They looked at each other and finally smiled. The wariness between them disappeared at this moment. They were like comrades who had fought side by side for many years. In their first battle, they worked together to achieve victory. Lei Xiao, a cultivator in the middle stage of the Golden Course stage. He was originally a rogue cultivator, but was accidentally caught. One of the men said and introduced himself to the 3 people in front of him. Su San, a rogue mercenary in the early stage of the Golden Course stage. A man in his 20s said, He Sheng, a rogue cultivator in the middle stage of the Golden Course stage. Another man said, My name is Lin Shi. I snuck out to play and was caught too. Unlike the rest of you, I'm only a cultivator in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. The one who spoke was a teenager who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. He was very young, but his temperament was not ordinary. Otherwise, he would not have been able to survive for 2 or 3 months in here. A few of them looked at each other and nodded. Then let's support each other along the way. I hope we can all survive. Thus, the few of them took the items from the demonic cultivator's body and continued to walk forward. The map was not in their hands, so they could only keep walking forward. Fortunately, The few of them worked together to kill a cultivator in the early stage of the nascent soul stage. Compared to the others, they had more trust in each other. Not long after the few of them left, Fengzhou picked up a tree branch from somewhere and walked forward step by step. He used the branch to push aside the weeds and leaves in front of him while paying attention to his surroundings. When he came to the front and saw the dead, demonic cultivator, a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. He did not stop and continued to walk forward. After walking for a while, he suddenly heard a shrill scream. The sound reverberated in the forest. If he listened carefully, he could tell where it came from. There was indeed an ambush. She sighed in her heart. As she walked, she felt a cold, murderous intent behind her. She turned around and saw a demonic cultivator in the nascent soul stage holding a long sword coming towards her. Seeing this, she smiled at the demonic cultivator. When the demonic cultivator saw the smile on the young man's face, he was stunned. He thought to himself, "Is this a fool? Can't you see that you're about to die? How can you still smile?" The tip of the sword did not stop, but in the next moment, a shocking shock occurred. The young man stood there without moving. When the tip of the sword pierced forward, he tilted his face slightly to avoid the sword. At the same time, he raised the branch in his hand and pointed forward at a speed that was too fast for one to cover one's ears. Yes. The demonic cultivator let out a muffled groan, and his entire body froze in place. A trace of blood leaked out from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the harmless-looking young man in front of him. He looked at the young man with a faint smile on his face, but the young man had taken his life with a single move. Bang! As his body fell backwards, Fengzhou pulled out the branch that had pierced into his chest. She watched as the devil cultivator twitched a few times before dying. She sighed softly. "You came looking for death yourself. You can't blame me." He threw the tree branch to the other side and took the items on the devil cultivator's body. Only then did he continue forward, his figure disappearing into the tall grass. After walking for a while, someone set their sights on Fengzhou, and the result of going against her was naturally death. Chapter 1826. Over a dozen nascent soul cultivators have died in less than half a day. The spectral elder narrowed his eyes as a sliver of thought flashed through his eyes. Have the corpses been brought back? They've been brought back. They've all been placed outside, according to the time they were discovered, a demon cultivator said with a serious expression. Over a dozen nascent soul cultivators had died in less than half a day. That was basically half of the people they sent out. Moreover, among the 300 or so people, the strongest was only at the peak of the Golden Core realm. However, just like that, they had silently taken care of over a dozen nascent soul cultivators without alerting anyone. How could they not be shocked? Could it be that there was a powerful person hiding among the 300 or so people? However, if there really was someone like that, they shouldn't have been captured by them. What was the reason? The spectral elder walked out from inside and looked at the dozen or so corpses in front of the room. He swept his sharp and vicious gaze over them and began to examine the first corpse. A fatal blow to the chest. There's a small hole. It's not from a blade or a hidden weapon. Looking at the hole, it should be from a tree branch. Moreover, it's a blunt tree branch that hasn't been sharpened. The spectral elder examined the corpse as he said, "Nascent soul cultivators already have powerful defenses. To be able to use a blunt tree branch to pierce through his chest and kill him in one strike, this person isn't simple. Could there be a powerful person hiding among the 378 people?" A demon cultivator on the side could not help but ask. Hearing that, the spectral elder glanced at him and sneered. "Do you think I'm blind? If those 300 or so people really had such skills, how could I not have seen it?" Hearing that, the demon cultivator could not help but lower his eyes. He did not dare to say anything else, as he was afraid that the spectral elder would vent his anger on him. The spectral elder looked at the second person and saw that his throat had been slit in one strike. Moreover, there were no signs of battle on his body. He could not help but narrow his eyes and look at the next person. He saw that all of them had been killed in one strike, and it was not a sneak attack either. As a result, he could conclude that this person's strength was definitely at the fairy realm. Only someone at the fairy realm had the ability to kill a nascent soul cultivator in one strike. Moreover, he didn't think that there was such a person hiding among the 378 people. On the contrary, someone must have snuck into their territory. Send a few fairy realm cultivators into the forest to take a look. Someone must have snuck in. I want to see who it is that dares to sneak into the territory of the Temple of Darkness. Understood. A demonic cultivator replied and quickly left. Elder Ghost paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. After a while, he instructed, send another group of people in. Tell them to form teams of 2. They can only attack the spies appropriately, but they can't kill them. Otherwise, there won't be many left. Tell them to pay more attention and see if there are any suspicious people. Yes, the other demonic cultivator replied and left in a flash. You go too. Go in and play with those people. Elder Ghost glanced at the seductive woman in revealing clothes behind him. Since you are willing to let me go, then I will go. The girl went forward and gently nestled into Elder Guay's embrace. Her hands brushed across his chest before she gently covered her red lips and smiled. She twisted her slender waist and headed towards the dense forest. Chapter 1827. In the forest, Feng Jiu was being chased by a nascent soul cultivator. She took to her heels and scurried around, shouting, help! Help! Damn it! Is this kid a rabbit? He can run so fast. The nascent soul cultivator cursed under his breath. He thought that this young man was too skinny and weak to be a spy. Since he coincidentally met him, he wanted to get rid of him first. Who would have thought that because of the weeds and trees here, he wouldn't be able to catch up to the youth after escaping? Seeing that the youth was only about 10 meters away from him, he couldn't help but feel a little angry in his heart. He also went head-to-head with the youth, determined to take his little life no matter what. Help, help! As Feng Jiu ran, she pushed aside the weeds in front of her and scurried around. Occasionally, she would meet some people around her, but when they saw that she was being chased by a nascent soul cultivator, their expressions changed, and they quickly avoided her. Well, in here, even self-preservation was a problem. Why would they care about other people's lives? Moreover, the person behind her was a nascent soul cultivator. Most of the people here were not a match for a nascent soul cultivator. After all, if they did not team up, how could a golden core cultivator kill a nascent soul cultivator? However, there were always exceptions to everything. In front of them, a group of men who were walking together heard the voice behind them. They turned around at the same time, and when they saw that the person who had cried out for help was the youth who had been chased by the corroding demon tiger, their expressions changed slightly. It's him, that young man. Yeah, I didn't expect that young man to still be alive after half a day. He runs so fast, it's not strange that he's still alive. Look, the devil cultivator chasing him is a nascent soul cultivator. Should we save him? When this question was asked, the men looked at each other and laughed. 2 of them immediately retreated to the left and right. They also pulled open a rope, but it was hidden in the weeds and could not be seen. The other 2 quietly jumped onto a tree with lush leaves, waiting for an opportunity. Feng Jiu saw it and glanced at them discreetly. He saw that the rope was left on the ground and was not pulled up. She was slightly surprised and ran over there. After running over the rope, she kicked a small stone. Her whole body fell forward as if she had lost her balance and fell to the ground. Stinking brat, let's see where you can run to this time. When the nascent soul cultivator saw this, he let out a hearty laugh and charged forward with his sword in hand. Just as he was about to slash at her, the rope hidden in the weeds on the ground was suddenly pulled up. The people on the left and right crossed over, trapping the nascent soul cultivator. At the same time, the 2 people on the tree jumped down and attacked the nascent soul cultivator with their sharp blades. The devil cultivator was startled. Just as he was about to use the sword in his hand to cut the rope, he discovered that it was the Vajra rope that they were equipped with. Seeing the fierce killing intent coming at him, he immediately raised the sword in his hand to block it. Clang! When the sword and blade collided, there was a clear sound of collision. However, when the sword and blade collided, the two people who had jumped down from the tree were sent flying by the nascent soul cultivator's airflow. They fell heavily into the weeds behind them. Who? Chapter 1828. The two of them were flung out and slammed heavily into the big tree. The two people who got up from the ground and pounced forward again, each holding onto his legs in an attempt to pull him down. Seeing this scene, the other two people pulled out their swords and stabbed forward. At this moment, two men around them also joined the battle. In an instant, there were 6 people instead of 4. With the 6 of them working together, the demonic cultivator was unable to kill them. Feng Jiu, who had fallen to the ground, looked at the 6 people besieging the demonic cultivator, and her eyes flashed. In the next moment, she picked up the Vajra rope and pounced forward to wrap it around the demonic cultivator's neck, tightening it around his neck. And a muffled groan was heard. The demonic cultivator's face turned red. He had been stabbed, and his limbs were pinned down by a person. His neck was also strangled by the Vajra rope, making it difficult for him to breathe. Go to hell. The man with the blade raised his blade and ruthlessly stabbed down again. This time, the blade hit the demonic cultivator's chest. The demonic cultivator groaned, and blood flowed out of his mouth. His body twitched, and his eyes were wide open. In the end, he swallowed his last breath. Only when the demonic cultivator stopped breathing did the few of them release their grip and fall to the ground, panting. Sure enough, one person's strength was small, but many people's strength was great. With everyone's strength, even if they weren't weak, they could still kill a nascent soul cultivator. Take the things from him and leave quickly, Lei Xiao said in a low voice. As he stood up, he glanced around. The people around him stared at them, but didn't move. Even if they saw that they had obtained a lot of things after killing the nascent soul cultivator, they didn't go forward to snatch it. Most of the others were alone, and only the few of them were in a group. The 2 men who had just joined saw the green-robed youth sitting there foolishly after strangling the demonic cultivator. They immediately pulled him up. Let's go. If we don't go, the nascent soul demonic cultivator behind us will be here. Thus, Feng Jiu was dragged away by them. Perhaps it was because they saw the few of them working together to kill a nascent soul stage devil cultivator. Some of the other people also learned to form teams. The small teams ranged from a few people to a dozen to 20 people. It was also because they formed teams that the death rate of the following battles was reduced. Feng Jiu, who was being led to the front, came back to her senses after a long while. She then looked at the people around her. While she was looking at them, they were also looking at her after introducing themselves. Aren't you a fast runner? Why can't I run in this forest? One of them asked with a rare smile. Evidently, he had also recalled the scene where Feng Jiu was being chased by the corroding devil tiger. It's not that the ground in this forest is uneven and there are a lot of weeds. Of course we can't travel at the same speed as on flat ground, Feng Jiu said. He looked at them and asked, Are you guys traveling in a group? Then I'll go with you, okay? When they heard this, they glanced at him. Lei Xiao said, Among all of us, it looks like you're the weakest. You can come with us. But I'll say this first. Don't be a burden. Feng Jiu smiled happily. Her face was simple and honest. No, I won't be a burden. Could she be a burden? What a joke. Chapter 1829. I have experience in the wild forest. Even without a map, I can lead you out of this forest. One of the people said. It was one of the 2 people who had just joined. When they heard this, they looked at each other and said, Then let's go. Don't waste time here. In this forest, time was life. If they didn't leave the forest before the agreed time, it would be very difficult for them to survive. Let's go this way. The man who had just spoken said as he led the way. The others followed behind him. Even though this was a forest, other than the chirping birds on the branches, the people walking in this forest didn't even see a single beast. In addition, Elder Gue didn't give them any fasting pills. While their physical strength was exhausted, their stomachs were also hungry. Gradually, some people's speed slowed down. I caught a snake. It's barely edible, Su San said as he held a snake that couldn't move in his hand and walked towards the people resting under a tree. They glanced at the snake. Some picked up branches, some skinned the snake, and some lit a fire. They were prepared to roast the snake and eat it. Even if there wasn't much meat, it was better than nothing. However, Fengjiu glanced at it and said, "Don't bother. This snake can't be eaten." As soon as she said that, everyone turned to look at her. "Why can't it be eaten?" Su Sen asked. "It's a poisonous snake." Fengjiu said, "It's fine as long as the gallbladder is taken out. The meat can still be eaten." As Su San spoke, he swiftly dealt with the snake in his hand and peeled off the skin. "I have been traveling for many years and have eaten many poisonous snakes. Even if I have never seen this kind of snake before, what difference does it make?" In his opinion, as long as it was processed, it was fine. Why couldn't it be eaten? This kind of snake's meat is poisonous. If you eat it, you'll be paralyzed or die. Fengjiu said again. His eyes fell on his hand that was stained with snake blood. He frowned slightly. Snake blood is also poisonous. Don't you want your hand anymore? Everyone looked at Fengjiu's serious face. It didn't seem like he was lying. They couldn't help but look at the skinned snake. Just as Meng San was about to say that he was fine, his hand suddenly went numb, and the snake fell to the ground. He couldn't help but be startled. Seeing this, how could the others not understand? They immediately looked at Fengjiu and asked, "You know medicine?" He was stained with snake blood. Was there an antidote? What if there is no solution? They had been traveling outside, but they had never encountered such a venomous snake. What kind of place was this? Susan looked at his hands that were quickly turning red and swollen. His heart sank, but he didn't say anything. What else could he say? She had just reminded him, but he didn't take it seriously. Who could he blame now? Fengjiu glanced at it and asked, "Where did you catch the snake?" There must be an antidote next to the place where the snake appears. In front, Su San said as he walked towards the place where he had caught the snake. Fengjiu followed behind him, and the others followed. Walking at the back, they looked at Fengjiu in surprise. They didn't expect this inconspicuous young man to know medicine. Moreover, he seemed to be very proficient in it. Chapter 1830. The sound of a venomous snake hissing could be heard. A brightly colored venomous snake darted out from the bushes and stared at them with its bloodthirsty tongue. When they saw the venomous snake, they were slightly surprised. They looked at Fengjiu with a glint in their eyes. How did she notice the venomous snake darting out from the bushes when she pulled Pai Sin back so suddenly? His reaction was even faster than the few of them. "Let's do it. What is the antidote?" Lei Xiao and the rest walked forward. Some of them held swords in their hands while others held tree branches. With their cultivation level, it was easy for them to deal with a few venomous snakes. The herb with a red line in the middle of the leaves beside the tree can cure the poison. She did not walk forward, but asked them to pick it. The few of them walked forward and cut one of the snakes in half. The rest of the snakes ran away. After checking with the tree branches, they did not find any more venomous snakes. Then, they went forward to pick the herb. Pick the leaves and swallow them. Then, chew some and boil it on your hands. The venom will be gone in about half an hour. Fengjiu said. Meng Sin did as he was told, and the others rested under a tree. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Meng San's complexion was getting better and the bruises on his hands were fading away. They praised him in their hearts. That seemingly unremarkable herb actually had such a miraculous effect. Can this herb cure other poisons as well? Lin Shi asked. He thought that if it could cure other poisons, he might as well pick more in case of emergencies. Hearing this, Fengjiu could not help but laugh. How is that possible? All poisons have to be treated according to the symptoms. How can there be one herb that can cure all poisons? Furthermore, this is not considered a spiritual herb. It is not very useful. You know medicine. Lei Xiao looked at Fengjiu and said. The youth did not answer her earlier, but this time, it was not a question, but a confirmation. I know a thing or two, she said with a simple and honest smile. Lei Xiao looked around and saw that there was no one around. She lowered her voice and asked, "Do you know what the poison in our bodies is?" Is there a cure? If the poison in their bodies could be cured, then they would not be controlled by the people from the Temple of Darkness. They could leave as soon as they had a chance. However, the poison in their bodies was a big problem. When the others heard this, their hearts jumped and they looked nervously at Fengjiu. Yes, if the youth had a way to cure the poison in their bodies. However, they shook their heads when they thought of it. How could the youth have a cure? Wasn't he poisoned as well? The poison in their bodies once every half-month. If they did not take the antidote, they would die. I don't know. She simply shook her head. The few of them sighed inwardly. They couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, but they also felt that it was natural. How could the poison that Elder Ghost may be something that just anyone could detoxify? How old was the youth? It was normal. Let's go. Yin, we must leave this forest within 3 days, Lei Xiao said, and led the group away again. Chapter 1831. Was it because of those people that she had killed? She thought to herself. She had killed all those people in one move, and they were all nascent soul-stage demonic cultivators. No matter how much they suspected, they would not suspect her. Night fell, and in the dark night, there were occasional screams. No one used the whole night to rest, but after a short rest, they continued to walk. Walking in the dark night, it was easy to get lost if you were not careful. However, the deeper they went, the more dangerous and difficult it was. Fengjiu's team of 7 people gradually joined in as they walked. From 7 people, there were more than 10 people, and then there were more than 30 people. Perhaps because there were more people, there was a trace of vigilance between them. After all, no one knew each other, and no one knew each other's character. However, they formed a team to survive, and they supported each other, but they did not dare to guarantee that they would face danger together. And even more so, they did not dare to guarantee that the people around them would not push them out in the face of danger. Fengjiu could be said to be the most inconspicuous among the group. When everyone was resting, she sat in the corner and ate grass that she had picked from somewhere. Yes, in the eyes of those who did not know, she was so hungry that she could not stand it anymore, and was sitting at the side eating grass. But they did not know that the grass she was eating was a kind of wild herb, which could stimulate saliva and barely fill the stomach. Hey, for you. Paisen took out a green fruit the size of an egg and threw it to Fengjiu. Who knew? It was suddenly intercepted by a hand. That brat ate it for free. It's better to give it to me than to him, a man said, and after receiving the fruit, he was ready to eat it. However, Paisen glared at him, stepped forward, and grabbed the man's hand. Who gave it to you? Give it to me. When he was about to take back the fruit, the man suddenly attacked him. Paisen quickly counterattacked, and the two of them fought back and forth. If this was in the past, no one would care about a single fruit. However, during the few months they were imprisoned in the plaza, other than sparring and training, they could not eat their fill. Not to mention, after they were imprisoned here, their physical strength was greatly depleted. They could not drink water, and they could not eat anything. In their eyes, a single fruit was naturally different. When the people around them saw this, they only glanced at them briefly before their gazes fell on Fengjiu. The dozens of people had different expressions in their eyes. They were surprised that the two of them would actually fight over a fruit. They were even more surprised that the man would give the extremely precious fruit to the youth. After all, the youth could be said to be the weakest among the dozens of people present. Even if he walked through this forest with them, he probably wouldn't survive to the end. Giving him the food was indeed, like that person said, a waste. Fengjiu ate the grass. The sourness in his mouth was very refreshing. Her gaze swept across the crowd without leaving a trace, taking in their expressions one by one. Then, her gaze fell on the 2 people who were fighting. To be honest, she was also surprised that Paisen would give the fruit to her. There were no wild animals in this forest, and there were no wild fruits either. She did not know where he got the fruit and gave it to her instead of eating it. Chapter 1832. Had they gone crazy from hunger? Perhaps, in their eyes, she was also crazy from hunger. Otherwise, how could she eat grass? Thinking of this, she sighed softly in her heart. She threw away the grass in her hand and stared at the two people. In her mind, she was thinking, the sky is about to brighten, and there are only 2 days left. I don't know if they've walked halfway. At this speed, can they really get out of here? A muffled groan was heard. Fengjiu came back to her senses and saw that the golden core cultivator, who had snatched the fruit, was kicked away by Su San. The fruit in his hand was also taken back by Su San. Get out of our group, Su San shouted in a deep voice. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. At this moment, his whole body was filled with a bloodthirsty aura. It was as if that person dared to take another step forward, he would dare to kill him. When that person saw this, he endured the pain and stood up while clutching his stomach. He glared at Su San with resentment and glanced at Fengjiu before he turned and left, disappearing into the weeds. Take it, Su San said with a dark face as he handed the fruit to Fengjiu. Fengjiu looked at him and reached out to take it. Thank you. Although she had water and food in her space, and this kind of physical work didn't consume much of her energy, she still made herself look very miserable for the whole day in order to not be suspected. Su San walked away with a straight face and said a few words to Lei Xiao and the others. Not long after, everyone was ready to move again. At this moment, 2 nascent soul cultivators suddenly appeared on the tree. They opened the black bags in their hands and sprinkled them down. Hiss! Hiss! Ah, it's a snake! It's a poisonous snake. In an instant, everyone who was sitting around exclaimed and quickly scattered. They only felt the slippery snakes coiling around their bodies. Some of them couldn't dodge in time and were bitten, screaming in pain. In the midst of the chaos, Fengjiu was eating a fruit. Before she could swallow the fruit, she saw a brightly colored poisonous snake flying toward her. She immediately grabbed a branch beside her and swatted it away. Then, she quickly got up and walked towards Lei Xiao and the others. In the process of walking, several poisonous snakes that were thrown towards her were removed by her. At this time, the 2 nascent soul cultivators had already left. Even if she wanted to throw the snakes at them, she couldn't find them. While she was dodging, she caught a glimpse of a poisonous snake slithering from the bottom of her feet. When it was about to bite the nightmare was paying attention to the top and did not pay attention to the bottom of his feet. Seeing this, she used her dodging action to step on the snake's head. With a stomp, he increased his strength. The snake tail swayed a few times before it stopped moving. Lei Xiao and the others shouted in a low voice and quickly left this place. She also left with them, and some people behind her also followed. They quickly walked about 500 meters before stopping. They saw that the original group of dozens of people, after being disturbed by the 2 bags of snakes, had less than 20 people left. Moreover, all of them had messy hair, were in a sorry state, and there was still anger on their faces. That's right. Just think about how they were captured here and controlled by others. Even their lives were not in their hands, and from time to time, things like this would happen. It really made them angry, but there was nothing they could do. Chapter 1833. So many people were caught off guard, and half of them were bitten to death by the poisonous snakes that fell from the sky. This kid, who looked the weakest and weakest, how could he still be standing there perfectly fine? Furthermore, he was still eating a half-eaten fruit in one hand. When he heard his words, he raised his head with a dazed expression on his face. How could such a foolish and unintelligent person survive just now? Everyone's gaze fell on the young man in green. A look of surprise flashed across their faces, but they did not say anything. To be able to survive, he must have some ability. Otherwise, he would have died long ago. Lei Xiao's gaze fell on Fengjiu for a while. A look of contemplation and inquiry flashed across his eyes. Others didn't notice it, but he did. When a poisonous snake on the ground was about to bite Nightmare, it was this young man who stepped on the snake's head. When he moved his foot away, the snake's head was already rotten on the ground. To be able to step on the snake's head with such precision in the chaos and save Nightmare 3's life, how could this kid be simple? Crunch. Fengjiu took a bite of the fruit. After looking at the crowd, His gaze fell on a man who was making a fuss about nothing. With some confusion, he said in a muffled voice, "You're still alive, too. How could I be dead?" Hearing this, the man choked and widened his eyes. Did he mean that he was more powerful than him? This kid's cultivation was only at the foundation establishment stage. How could he talk to a golden core stage cultivator like him? He really did not know his limits. Pfft, stupid kid. The man sneered but did not say anything else. After all, among those who were caught here, there were also honest people. All right, let's go. The sky is bright. Let's get out of this forest first. As Lei Xiao spoke, he glanced at Fengjiu and said something to the man beside him. The group of people continued to move forward. In this forest, some people had obtained a map, while others had lost their way. They were running around in all directions. The deeper they walked, the more a cloud of smoke gradually filled the forest, obstructing their vision. Help! Is there anyone? Help! As they walked, they vaguely heard a cry for help, and it seemed that there was more than one person. The few people in front stopped and looked at the hazy mist in front of them. It seems to be a formation. It is indeed a formation. Those people should be trapped inside. The fog is rather dense. Even if there's a formation, we can't see clearly. To be able to trap those people, I'm afraid it's no ordinary formation. As Lei Xiao and the others spoke, they discussed whether or not they should save those people. It was at this moment that the trapped person seemed to have noticed the people outside, and his voice rang out once more. "We have a map. If you save us, we can look at the map together. If you have a map, you will be able to get out of here. Otherwise, you won't be able to get out." Hearing that voice, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. They have a map. Save him. It is indeed more convenient to have a map of this place. But what if they are lying to us? Another person hesitated. We also need to pass through here. Let's study how to pass through first. Also, which one of you is good at formations? If there's anyone who's good at array formations, let me know. As Lei Xiao spoke, her gaze swept across the crowd. Chapter 1834. I know a little about arrays too, but I don't know how this array is like. I can't guarantee that I can break it. Another man said. Hearing the two say that they only knew a little about arrays, one of the men said, "I'm quite proficient in arrays. Maybe I can give it a try." When he said this, his tone was obviously a little smug. Fengjiu looked at them, finished eating the fruit, and stretched out her hand. Her voice was neither loud nor soft as she said, "I know a little about arrays too." However, after everyone's gaze swept past him, they automatically ignored Fengjiu. It was obvious that they looked down on him. They felt that even if this young man knew a little about arrays, it was probably just the tip of the iceberg. After all, the few of them who knew about arrays were all golden core cultivators. How much could he, a mere foundation establishment cultivator, know? Since that's the case, the two of you come with me to take a look. The cultivator who said that he was proficient in arrays said to the other two and took a step forward. Seeing this, Fengjiu put down her hand embarrassedly. All right, if they were ignoring her, so be it. She would continue to be invisible. The three of them went ahead to explore the path while studying what kind of array it was. The rest of them stayed where they were until, after a while, the three of them returned. All of you follow me. This array isn't that big of a deal. It's just a common bewitching array. Although it's been slightly modified, it shouldn't be a big problem. The man who said that he was proficient in arrays said, and gestured for everyone to follow him. Seeing this, the crowd looked at one another before following the three of them into the fog. In the array, the fog became thicker and thicker. Even the people in front couldn't see. Hence, the people in front let the people behind pull on each other's clothes. Fengjiu walked at the back and didn't pull on the clothes of the person in front. The person in front also refused to pull on her clothes. Hence, she followed silently. However, after walking for a while, she was slightly surprised. She raised her eyebrows and stopped in her tracks. She couldn't see clearly, but the sound of footsteps seemed to be right in front of her. And for some reason, the voices of the people who were crying for help disappeared in here. Interesting. She curled the corners of her lips and revealed a smile. She released her divine sense at this moment and noticed that there were no flying immortals or nascent soul cultivators watching her. Only then did she slow down her pace and casually walk through the array. As for the people in front, after walking for a while, they felt that something was wrong. They couldn't help but stop. This isn't right. Why does it seem like it's going in circles? Where's the person who called for help? Why is there no sound? Lei Xiao asked from the front, but no one could answer. At this moment, the man who said he was proficient in formations had sweat dripping down his forehead. He muttered, "How could this be? How could this be? This array formation seemed to be able to change. It wasn't like this when I came in." Hearing this, how could the crowd not know that they were also trapped? For a moment, they all fell silent. At this moment, Su San shouted, "Kid? Brat? Are you there?" Not hearing anything for a long time, he knew something was wrong and asked, "Where's that young man? Who saw him?" Pai San counted the number of people until he reached the last person and asked, "Where is the young man behind you? Wasn't he pulling on your clothes? Why didn't you say anything when he went missing?" Chapter 1835. Perhaps it was because the green-robed youth had saved him before, but along the way, he paid more attention to him than the others. Naturally, he also hoped that the youth could walk out of here alive. Now that more than 10 people were walking together, but the youth was lost, his face immediately darkened. Without saying a word, Payson strode back. In his opinion, if the young man in green had not come with them, he would have died soon. He had saved his life, so he could not leave him alone. "Ming San, where are you going?" Lei Xiao and the others walked over. "I'm going back to find that kid," Ming San said. "Let's go with you. Otherwise, it'll be difficult to walk alone." Lei Xiao said, "Yes, let's go together. He should be behind us. Maybe he's walking slowly, but he should be fine." Lin, she said. Seeing a few of them walking back, one of the people behind them called out, "You don't have to go back. Even if you go back the way you came, you won't be able to get out. The array here is constantly changing. If you're not careful, you won't be able to walk back." "Aren't we trapped now? What's the difference?" They didn't even turn their heads as they continued to walk forward. Seeing the few of them leave, the remaining 10 people stood there in silence. One of them asked, "Why are they so nice to that kid? It's not a big deal if he's lost." Earlier, Ming Sin was poisoned by a snake. It was that kid who saved him. Another person said while shaking his head, "It's too late to go back now." At this time, Feng Jiao, who did not know that Ming San and the others had turned back to look for her, was squatting on the ground and drawing circles with a branch. Well, it looked like circles, but it was actually an array. She was analyzing the changes in the array and the locations of the life and death gates. Due to the wonders of this array, when the array changed, the people trapped in it would not be able to call for help. Therefore, after squatting here for a while, she could faintly hear a few cries for help. It was from the people from before. The array changes in half an incense's time. Then, if we're here, it should be like this. If we want to get out of here, we should go in from here. She murmured softly as she drew circles on the ground with a branch. "Kid, where are you?" Suddenly, Su San's voice was heard. Feng Jiao was slightly surprised and looked up. There was a vast expanse of white in front of her, and she couldn't see anyone. She couldn't tell the direction of the voice either. However, she had already circled around and could easily reach them. Thus, he stood up and wiped away the formation on the ground with his foot. Only then did he walk forward. However, he had only walked a short distance when he heard a muffled groan and smelled the scent of blood. She frowned slightly and released her divine sense. She saw a nascent soul realm cultivator attacking the people trapped in the formation. Meng San and the others were also rushing towards the center of the formation. Seeing this, she quickened her pace and walked forward. Perhaps if a few golden core stage cultivators joined forces outside, they would have a slim chance of survival. But in here, they would only be killed. Chapter 1836. In an instant, the aura of death enveloped him. The pressure of a nascent soul cultivator was so terrifying that it made him break out in cold sweat. He desperately told himself to get out of the way, but his entire body was frozen. It was as if he had been frozen in 1,000-year-old ice. He was frozen as he stared at the sharp sword piercing towards his forehead. Meng San. When Lei Xiao saw this, he was still a distance away. Just as he thought Meng San would be killed, he heard Meng San groan. His originally stiff body suddenly bent down, and he fell to the ground. And Su San let out a muffled groan and fell to the ground. Before he could recover, Lei Xiao, who was behind him, rushed forward and dragged him to the other side. The few of them did not dare to hesitate and quickly gathered together to resist the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator. However, for some reason, this nascent soul cultivator was determined to kill them. The pressure he released was extremely strong. Even if they wanted to resist, they couldn't withstand the pressure. Pooh! They spat out a mouthful of blood and felt the blood in their bodies become chaotic. Under the pressure, they fell to the ground and couldn't stand up. In front of a nascent soul cultivator who was a level higher than them, the pressure he released was like Mount Tai. It was difficult to even breathe. The nascent soul cultivators who fought them before didn't release such a strong pressure. Just the pressure alone was enough to let them know that he wanted them dead. Mere golden core cultivators want to live from my hands? There are hundreds of you. Even if you die, it'll be the same for you. Die. The nascent soul cultivator's cold and ruthless voice sounded. His sharp sword contained sword chi as it attacked Meng San and the others. Just as they were prepared to die, they suddenly saw a figure rush out. It was like a ghost, so fast that they couldn't see it clearly. They only knew that in the fog, the figure rushed out with lightning speed and grabbed the nascent soul cultivator, attacking them. Who is it? The nascent soul cultivator's gloomy voice sounded. But after that, there was no more movement. They sat on the ground in shock and couldn't recover for a while. Who is it? Who saved them? With such skills and speed, he was definitely a strong person who was above the fairy realm. If there was really a strong person who had managed to sneak in, would they be saved? Why are you all sitting on the ground? Feng Jiu walked out of the fog and looked at the people who were sitting on the ground in a daze with a surprised expression. She looked around and asked, "Why are there only a few of you? Did you guys get separated too?" It took them a while to regain their senses. They stood up and looked around. Gone. That dangerous aura was gone. It seemed that the nascent soul cultivator had been killed. But who was the one who saved them? At this moment, no one thought that it was Feng Jiu who had appeared in front of them. After all, how could a Foundation establishment youth do such a thing? They didn't even suspect that it was him, so they ruled him out. "We're here for you. Are you all right?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.